Hello, and welcome to Cultural Luminaries, episode 11. On this show, we explore bold ideas, creative leadership, and systems shifts shaping the future of work and society. I'm your host, Jyoti Jani, author of Creating Culture, which published this week. um, Strategist and experienced designer. And this series is all about spotlighting the change makers who are lighting the way into the future through what feels increasingly like dark times. So we are here to light it up, lead the way, and to showcase what bold, creative, and courageous leadership looks like today in 2025. Today, I am so excited to welcome a very special guest to our show. Jeff Harry shows individuals and companies how to tap into their true selves to feel their happiest and most fulfilled. Get this, all by playing. So we are play people, and today's going to be a very playful and fun episode while talking about very serious things, I will say. So Jeff also is an international speaker who has presented at conferences such as Inbound, South by Southwest, and Australia's Pause Fest, showing audiences how major issues in the workplace can be solved using play. Jeff has worked with Google, Microsoft, Southwest Airlines, Adobe, the NFL, Amazon, and Facebook, helping their staff to infuse more play into the day-to-day. Over the past 15 years of facilitation and speaking, Jeff's main goal has been to help work suck less by assisting leaders in building a playground workplace atmosphere that motivates their staff to do their most vibrant work. He was selected by Engagedly as one of the top 100 HR influencers for his organizational development work around addressing toxicity in the workplace. And Jeff believes that we already have many of the answers that we seek, and by simply unleashing our inner child, we can find our purpose and in turn help create a better world. Wow!
Let's go.
Thank you so much for being here. Welcome. Welcome to my show.
I'm excited. Let's do this.
Oh, yeah, no, you are shiny and fun. And I just like every time we talk, it feels like a party. So let's have a party today. Like, let's get into it. You know, like I got a lot of things I want to talk about. Like, obviously, today's show is about the power of play in the workplace. And we are one of a couple of play people, or one of a few play people within the subset of larger play people who really believe in using play to dismantle oppressive systems. And so we're going to get into that later because we know that we want that to be kind of the main topic. Like, how do we address toxic behavior? How do we deal with sexist behavior, racist behavior in the workplace? And this is becoming an increasingly complicated topic right now. So I'm really excited to dig into this juiciness with you. But first, I'm going to ask you the question I ask all my guests when they come on the show. This is Cultural Luminaries. What's lighting you up these days? Please share.
What's lighting me up? Well, your book, let's talk about it. That's super exciting. I actually have a few friends' books lighting me up. Let's see yours. Let's hear you creating culture. Let's go. Next week, I'm going to my friend's book launch in New York. She's producing a book, Songs of My Grandmother, Sarah Serrani. But so what's lighting me up is other people creating really cool stuff like you, like Serrani, that is inspiring others to actually use their voice more and more. My friend Dimple Dabalia just made her book as well. And I think what's really important is a lot of people don't feel seen right now. And I feel like your books can help actually do that.
Oh, yeah. Let's like celebrate your friend Sarah and all of the authors, all of the creatives out there who are working hard to create a body of work or something that shares your voice, shares your perspective with the world. I know I had to dig deep to get this book done. I had to face a lot of my demons and inner critics and overcome a lot of just doubt to get to
Yeah.
this point. And so I know now that I'm here, part of this club, I know what it takes, and I have a lot of respect because
Part
it's
of the club. I want to be part of the club.
you
Oh,
are going to be part of the club though, right? Because somebody told me you're writing a book, and I actually want to talk about that a little bit because you have engaged in the book writing process and of course I wouldn't have expected anything less, a very playful way. Can you share with us a little bit, because I want our audience to hear this, how are you approaching book writing, as I call you, like the granddaddy of play?
oh my goodness. Oh wow, man, that's a lot. So I've been struggling to write for the last 2 years. I haven't been able to do it. It's too serious, and I'm putting too much energy on like how important, and I don't want to mess it up and all this perfection stuff, even though I'm a play guy, right? So I was like, so a friend of mine, Angie Cole, suggested, she was just like, well, why don't you do it through play? And I, on a separate note, just saw an Airbnb that had a lazy river and a slide and go-karts and an arcade. And I was like, I want to stay at that Airbnb. I don't know why, but I just want to. Well, anyway, came up with this idea, inspired by Angie, to fly a bunch of my friends in to this Airbnb. Someone came from the Dominican Republic, someone came from Peru, another person came from Oakland. They all flew in, and for 3 days, while we like floated down a lazy river and like rode go-karts, we brainstormed through play the book.
So tell me, like, in this relaxed, fun, enjoyable state with your friends, no
Yeah.
less, what were some of the like ideas or the ways that you were able to brainstorm
Yeah.
ideas?
So we did some strange play things. So we wrote a 1-star reviews. What would be the 1-star reviews of the book? That was really hilarious. We'd write who the book was for, who the book was not for, which was really interesting. We did a lot of inner critic stuff. So basically, they would and we got this idea from my therapist of all people, where they would give me praise and then my inner critic would respond to them. We did this 4 or 5 times over the span of 3 days, which actually quieted my inner critic during that time.
Wow.
Even when we weren't doing book stuff, and we were like, okay, let's decide what we want to eat. Instead of talking about what we wanted to eat, we did it in a playful way. We'd be like, all right, describe your favorite dish without saying the word, without saying the name of it. And then everyone would do it. And the person that described theirs the best, we'd be like, that's what we're eating. Like everything was play oriented. Yeah, we even took our inner critic thoughts, put them outside. We actually threw them at each other, and we had like these shields that had like all of our powerful words on it. And then all the inner critic stuff fell on the ground, and then we rode go-karts over the inner critic thoughts.
Wow. I mean,
And we floated down the lazy river while someone was on the whiteboard.
whoa. I love all of those. I especially love the 1-star reviews because, I mean, I'm a big fan of naming your fears and like
Yeah.
playing with your fears. Invite your demons to dinner with you, like sit and break bread together, right? And that's really what I'm hearing, is that all of those things that we usually shove down, they're like, I'm not gonna like even think about that. You're just like, hey, let's not only think about it, let's like play with these ideas and like trample them with our go-karts.
Mhm.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I can't wait for your book to come out. We'll have another party once it's out. So please keep us posted, because then you can be part of the club too. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So so let's talk a little bit. Like I want to get into the you talk a lot you do a lot of talks, and you fly around the whole country speaking with HR professionals, with leaders, with workplaces about how to handle toxic behavior in the workplace. And so we both know that workplaces can be riddled with toxicity. Like for every, you know, however many people that are amazing to work with and collaborative and open-minded, it feels like there's just as many who are selfish, closed off, aggressive, rude, lack empathy. And we're seeing these kinds of characters taking up a lot of space right now in 2025. We're seeing toxicity in the highest office, and I think that it's very triggering. Like for me, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
I've seen behavior like that before around executive boardroom tables, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of our audience could relate to this. Like we deal with difficult people at work, and so talk to me about, when it comes to these kinds of power dynamics and toxic behaviors, how does play disrupt these dynamics? Like, what's your take on why play is so important in addressing toxicity?
So probably the best way to describe it is like, you remember Harry Potter? Like, do you remember the Weasley brothers at all? Did you
Yeah, of
ever watch it?
course. Yeah.
Okay, so remember when the Weasley brothers fly into owl testing and Professor Umbridge is there and she has all these decrees that she's put everywhere, and they just basically go in and start throwing fireworks and just blow up all of her decrees. That is mischief. That is the playful mischief that I'm talking about. Because if you think of Harry Potter, I'm just using it as an example,
Mm-hmm.
they always were causing mischief, but they were always causing mischief to watch out for people. They were always looking out for each other.
Mm-hmm.
So the mischief is just like, okay, what ways can we challenge power, right? Or in what ways can we create community where we're starting to organize against power without actually challenging it just yet until we're ready? Right? The
Mm-hmm.
Weasleys didn't do it until they were ready. They were ready to leave the school. They were like, we're quitting the school, so we're out. But we're going to do it on a grandiose scale. So I think play, first and foremost, is supposed to bring a certain level of lightness, but it's also supposed to bring a certain level of psychological safety and community to the group. So it's not about the toxic person right now. It's about how are we organizing with each other and figuring out, okay, what do we specifically want to do? And how do we want to challenge that power?
Mm-hmm. Wow, so I'm hearing a lot of different layers in your response, right? Like there's just the embodied sense of mischief and playfulness that allows you to kind of approach something without so much seriousness, which actually is
Yeah.
quite scary. But there's also like this strategic piece. There's also like,
Yeah.
well, what are the rules that don't make sense in this game? And how do I think two steps ahead about how I'm going to disrupt this dynamic? Because you don't always want to lay all your cards on the table and be like creating mischief like recklessly. You're like,
Yeah.
you're being clever and mischievous, like you're plotting and scheming with your people. And that might make it sound like, I don't know, like dark.
Dumbledore's army. That's how they did it. That's another. They were playing and learning how to defend themselves, right?
Yeah.
So I almost see play in three separate ways when you're thinking about it in the workplace, right? There's play as rest, like
Mm-hmm.
meaning like I'm just gonna play outside of work. That's gonna be my sanity because I can't tolerate work right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe that's how you're using play.
Sure.
Like, because rest is resistance in and of itself, right?
Totally.
And then there's like um play as like resistance. Okay, how are we going to actually challenge power, right? And how do I create community so that we can challenge power? And then the last part would be like play as like, how do we create something better? Like, what's a
Mm.
more alternative utopia of play? Because I think right now, what is it like? I forgot the quote, but someone was saying, a lot of toxic men can see the end of the world before they see the end of capitalism, because they can't, because they see end of capitalism, the end of their power, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to figure out a better, more alternative utopia that we're going for, rather than just being against the toxic people, right?
Totally.
so that we can
Totally.
argue like, all right, clearly Twitter is a mess, or whatever you call it now, X is a mess because of the way in which that leader is. Do we want our world to be like that? Because that's kind of what he's now doing to the government, right? Like, and if not, then what are we willing to do differently? And
Hmm.
what other organizations actually represent the type of world that we want?
Yes. Yes, because it's not only that we don't want to be like that, it's that we want to be like how we want to be. And so perhaps this is like a really cool place for us to kind of, one of the reasons I really love what you're talking about is like my work in emotional intelligence. uh I share a lot of like how we have a wide range of emotions, but at the core of all emotions are two. Like there's fear, which is our negative reinforcing emotion, which is like when we're experiencing any threats or perceived threats to our safety and survival, we have unpleasant emotion, which is like, don't do that. And when we have a pleasant emotion or love, which is the polar opposite of fear, that means it's good for our survival. It's like our nervous system's like, yes, more of that.
Yeah.
And so we're living like, I think a lot of the systems that we're navigate, even in our workplaces, like I think about the way performance management works, the way that pay and incentives work, the way that we reward people, or the way that we negatively reinforce, like use
Mhm.
like toxic behavior so much is about like being aggression and trying to scare
Yep.
people into not
Yep.
doing something.
Yep.
And I remember like working in corporate, some of my most scary times where people were being aggressive towards me and I'd get triggered into this fear state, and my whole thinking would shut down. And some of my most generative creative times where I was working with people on initiatives and projects that were investing in people and people's learning and development and growth and empowerment, which is really good for business. Right? Like that's
Yeah.
this is the part that we're like, actually good business is investing in people so they have what
Yeah.
they need to be successful, and they're not like spending multiple hours a day worrying about how to navigate a conversation with their toxic boss. Like, so, but anyway, like I digress. So love and fear, right? So the fear is so de facto in our world right
Mhm.
now, and our
Yeah.
systems are designed to manufacture fear and profit off of fear and shame and all of the other emotions that come with it. So love is really the way, right? Like love and connection is really the way. Like if something feels good and we can help other people feel good, then our nervous systems are lightening up, our brain chemistry is lightening up, and we're able to actually access this state where we can imagine better futures. So um, I'd love to just hear your take. Like we talk so much about imagining futures and play, but I want to just pause for a second and be like, what's the future that you're imagining? Because I know,
Yeah.
like you're a play person, and I know that you're no stranger to the fear situation, just like all of us. But what do you imagine and envision for us beyond this system that we're currently navigating? Like, what do you see in your crystal
Yeah.
ball for us and our play people and the people that want love and connection and not fear?
Okay. So I'll answer it first by addressing where we're at, and then I'll address with how the what I think is the alternative.
Okay.
I feel like where we're at right now is we have a bunch of insecure, lonely men who needed to go to therapy long before, maybe when they were kids, and now are trying to control everything because they are so insecure. And great examples are like Jeff Bezos recently was interviewed and he said, I want my staff to be fearful when they go to work every morning. And why? Why? Because he doesn't want new ideas. One, he wants to be able to control everything. It's the same thing with Elon and trying to control everything. It's like these really insecure guys that, like, frankly, can't fill their cup with, their whole of money is not large enough that they constantly are taking and taking, and they themselves will destroy, the earth if we just allow them to keep running amok. So like that's where I feel like we're currently at, dealing
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of these insecure dudes.
Yes.
And them being and them not only taking up so much space, but almost trying to persuade the rest of society that they're winning, which they're not, right? Because in many ways because they're controlling so much, it's slipping out of their hands, right? Like
Mm.
I actually partly almost believe it's like the last hurrah of toxic men.
Mm.
And what I'm hoping for, and what I've learned from many of my friends that are in the somatic world, is
Yeah.
that hopefully the era of women is finally coming to
Yes.
pass where they lead, because we've done the toxic masculine thing for the last 2,000 years or so, right?
Totally.
And that's why we've had so many wars and so much toxicity and so many plagues and so much stuff, because it's been so much about competition. And until we embrace like a divine feminine way of taking care of the world, the world won't survive. Like the earth will be fine, but we won't survive. So it really is like the time of divine feminine. So what does that look like in the workplace? 4-day work weeks. It looks like AI doing the jobs that we don't want to do, not AI doing the jobs that we like, not the creative stuff, but
Yeah.
taking over the stuff we don't want to do, right?
Yes.
4-day, 3-day work weeks, not just work life balance, but actually more life than work balance,
Totally. Yeah.
We don't need to be working more than 15 to 20 hours a week, you
Totally.
know?
Yes.
And then the community watching out for each other, so that there isn't poverty. With a lot of Native American tribes, they never had poverty, because if one person suffered, the whole tribe suffered, right?
Right.
So we have to get back to a lot of almost like the indigenous ways in which people are living, to look out for community, which really ties in very well with Blackfoot's Nation's hierarchy of needs. I could go into that later on, but it's
Yeah,
fascinating.
Maslow took
Abraham,
it from Blackfoot Nation. He stole the
exactly,
idea.
right?
I read about this. It was
Maslow
appropriated.
misinterpreted the dude. Abraham Maslow misinterpreted the hierarchy of needs and made it
Yeah,
all about individuals, when Blackfoot Nation's hierarchy of needs was all about community. We
correct.
totally tossed that out. So I'm hoping we're moving into a divine feminine, more community oriented way of living.
I
That's
love
what I
it.
hope.
I love it so much. And I'm just going to yes and you for a minute, because
Yeah.
yes to everything you said. Like, and inside organizations, it's not a lost cause, right? Like the 4-day work week, yes, you know, systems and structures that are equitable so that we're not like disincentivizing women, mothers from gaining power and influence inside organizations, like not having parental leave policies, not having things like equitable performance and promotion practices is so important. And, in the world of strategy and design, using principles of inclusive design, when you're doing strategic planning, invite a diverse cross section of people in around the table. Use play to develop your strategic plans, to design products and services. And I talk a lot about this in my book as well, because there's 3 levels of systems. There's the personal, the interpersonal, and the systemic. And change happens at all 3 levels. And I think about how important it is for all of us to think about where in the system we want to intervene and disrupt those
Yeah.
toxic, insecure people. And it's not just men, okay? There are
Yeah.
toxic and insecure women as well,
Yeah.
emulating that toxic patriarchal model. So it's more like masculine norms, rather
Yes,
than just
exactly.
men
Right.
and women, because there's a lot
Yes.
of ways that we all perpetuate those norms. And I think that just saying men and women actually creates a level of division where
Yeah.
we are all needing to work together. Like it takes men and women working together to promote feminine leadership styles. We're actually, I was just reading an article the other week about how this study that was done on countries that had women involved in negotiating peace talks were like 30 or 40% more likely to have peace over like a 15 or 20-year period. It's like,
Yeah.
why are we sending men to
Yep.
negotiate our most
Yep.
important issues, whether it's like issues of national security
Yep.
or issues of just like corporate governance and corporate social
Yep.
responsibility or lobbying into government? Like, we all have a role to play, and I think that elevating women and feminine norms, like, I'm here for it. And as a mum, I have just, as a mother who left corporate because I didn't feel valued, and I felt so like gaslit in terms of like being celebrated on the one hand and appreciated on the one hand, while in one-on-one conversations devalued and told
Yeah.
like, no, there's not, we can't change this inequitable process, sorry, like being told no, and having people get aggressive with me when I questioned authority. I had to leave, and it still hurts me, right? Because I know that we need people inside institutions as well as outside of institutions applying pressure to this consolidated abuse of power. And we're not taking it anymore. So, like, if you're listening to this conversation right now, either live or afterwards, like, I just want you to know that you're not alone. And any way that you can push back, resource yourself, push back, using the lens of play, using the lens of um, making this movement fun and joyful. It's like you can't use the same kind of thinking to dismantle these systems as what was as the thinking we've been using. And I think that making this movement joyful and fun is the only way we're gonna grow bigger than them, and create new healthier systems, because we don't have to choose between profit, people, and planet. We can
Right.
actually reach a homeostasis in the system where all of these things can be stable, and we can all have what we need. And that's the future I want to build for my kids and my grandkids. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, you bring up a really good point, right? Because yeah, I'm all about creating mischief, right? As John Lewis used to talk about, like he created good trouble. Like
Necessary
it's all
trouble.
about creating good trouble. How do we challenge? And this is the point that you brought up really well. It's just like it's not men versus women. It's a patriarchal system versus all of us, right? Across the spectrum. And how do we challenge the system where everyone is suffering under this system except for a few people? And I think a lot of times we don't realize where a lot of like our productivity measurements even come from. I read this, and this was super depressing, that Harvard did a study that found out where do our productivity measurements and modern day management strategies come from? And they actually come from slavery. It's the way in which we used to measure how productive someone was picking cotton, and then the overseer that managed that area, they were rewarded based off of how much they picked. They did not care about how it was. They do not care about how horrible the people were in order to get it picked. They just care about production. And we really have not changed our way of measuring productivity since.
Yeah.
And this is when I ask, like, okay, well, what is a different future? A different future is we challenge what we mean by productivity. We challenge what we mean by success. Is success selling your company after like a year or 2 years, or is success like having the company around for 50 years? Like if we were in a much more sustainable company way, then we wouldn't be obsessed over quarterly results, because that seems absurd. It's only 3-4 months. Why would we be wasting and stressing out about it? So like when I talk,
Totally.
I'm doing a talk right now called Work is Broken, where I'm challenging companies that have laid people off after they hit their metric numbers.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's not even beneficial to work harder anymore. It doesn't even make sense, right? So we really have to be challenging, well, what's the point, right? If the only people that are benefiting, if the only people that are benefiting are at the top, then what's the point of me even working?
this is such an important point, right? Because, and the word that comes up for me is value. You know, as you're thinking about like, how do we define success? Like, what are we measuring? I don't think we're measuring really what has value. And it's like, I'd like to use the metaphor of like the car. Like, imagine you're driving a car, right? And you ever driven in a car with somebody that like a lead foot brake rider? They speed up really fast and then they slam on their brakes. They speed
Yeah,
up
that's
really
my nephew.
fast, they slam on the
Yeah,
brakes. It's like,
yeah.
how much gas are you burning? Like,
Oh,
going up and down. Like, you know, think about like when I worked at Boeing, there'd be all these, every time a new manager took the helm, there'd be a reorg. You know, I'm going to restructure the organization, and it
yep.
creates so much churn. I think about what Elon Musk is doing right now with Doge, how much chaos and wasted energy. He's basically
Wasted energy.
slamming on the gas, slamming on the brakes. All this gas is being burned, fumes are being created. But what if we just drive at like a steady pace, not burn all of the gas in the tank, and we can literally drive longer, straighter,
Mm-hmm.
clearer together? Like, I think that that's where we're at. Was we have to think about value and energy in terms, instead of these like disruptive up and down volatile cycles. How can we get in these sustainable long stretches where we can just go at a
Right.
steady pace, you know?
Where we're not stressed out.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
if you think, because if we think about it, think of Boeing, for example, right? So much stress in the last 5 to 10 years,
Yeah.
right? And talk about a place that's broken is the guy that oversaw, the CEO that oversaw so many of the accidents that actually happened, walked away with like a 30, I think, $1 million bonus, like some ups and stock options in the worth billions. So it's like, wait, that doesn't even make sense. He oversaw the worst time in Boeing's history and he was rewarded for it. Why was he rewarded for it? Because the stock went up. So is that the only thing that we're measuring now? Just the stock going up? And I think we forget about how, like, back in the 70s, that wasn't a thing. Like, we did not care about that. There was an economist, I think yeah, like late 70s, called what was this, Milton Friedman. And
Mm.
his whole argument, he wrote it in an article, but then it became a book, where he was just like, your only focus should be pleasing your employers, meaning your shareholders. So then all these companies changed from like these longevity companies of never laying anyone off or barely laying anyone off to starting to do layoffs only to increase their bottom line.
Mm.
And then there was a guy by the name of Jack Welch, who became the poster child of this in the 80s and 90s, where he would just lay people off and do that start stop thing that you were saying, and he was rewarded for that. And then every other company started doing that. So
Mm.
it's really a small amount of people that have decided to create such a warped system. And that's why I feel like there's so many more of us that can change what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love it. And actually, there's a lot of people changing it as we speak, and there's a lot of really incredible things happening. Like, I think about the movement towards like employee owned companies, you know, like a
Mhm.
recent company I consulted with has a employee stock ownership plan, an ESOP. And it's just about taking like our methods and our structures of ownership and how we are actually building our organizations in a way that actually incentivizes the people who are doing the work, rather than the people at the top of a very high hierarchy who are extracting value. And I mean, there's a huge movement towards flattening organizations, you know, and we're also thinking about the interpersonal cultural norms that need to go along with that, so that there is a true distribution of power. But I will say that organizations that I know that have like been making this move into more of a distributed leadership model, there's a lot of personal work that comes along
Yeah.
with that. there's a lot of us having to question what we've learned about obeying authority and blaming leadership when things go wrong. Like we all have, like when I worked at Boeing, people would like complain about leaders all day long. And then once you get into management, you actually walk around with your target on your back as well, because people want to blame you for everything and don't take responsibility for their actions. So what comes along with it's kind of like the shadow work of when you're moving into distributed leadership is we all have to be accountable for our own behaviors, and sometimes that means when we screw up or when we're having a hard time or we make a mistake, that we have to own it, and we have to be open to criticism and provide criticism in a compassionate way. Like we need those interpersonal and personal skills to actually be resilient enough to go into that uncharted territory, which a lot of people don't think about. But
Yeah.
that's why the change has to happen, like in our
Yeah.
behaviors and our systems at the same time, you know.
Yeah, and what's challenging about that is like it's almost like someone that is choosing to go to therapy, that's choosing to do somatic work, that's choosing to do shadow work. That stuff is hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the alternative where you're just like, well, I could just be lazy and let this guy just tell me what to do,
Right.
right? I could see why some people choose to praise these, what is it, these Rockefellers of today,
Yeah.
because they believe that one day they'll become a billionaire as well. And they don't want to do the actual internal work, which is it's hard.
It
But
is hard.
in the long run, they would probably benefit more from doing that than actually instead of deifying all of these Rogan-esque broligarchy dudes.
You know, it's massively true. And you know, an organization that I write about in my book, RVC, they when they went through this movement, they actually had a moment where they spoke to their staff and they're like, we're this is the journey that we're on, and if you're not up for it, then this is not the right organization for you. And quite a few people ended up leaving the organization at that time. But what happened was is they got clearer in terms of who they wanted to be and who the right people were to be a part of that team moving forward. And that's okay, right? Like sometimes walking away from relationships so that you can come more into alignment is actually really healthy. And so I think about how we're all part of this massive ecosystem, and when inside of an organization, it is important that we align with people and engage in relationships where we're working towards the same thing and we agree on our values and how we want to get there. Because if we're not aligned in a value, if we don't have values alignment with the people that we're working with, then that's when you have to get political. That's when you can't be honest with each other because you're coming at things from different directions. So we have to build alliances honestly, and this is where play can be so powerful. Because and let's talk about this, because it's probably we're going to have to land this plane now. We're going to have to like bring this conversation to an end in the not too distant future. But I think about how we host, you know, retreats, workshops, talks. You know, companies spend money on getting people in a room, whether that's a virtual room or a physical room, because people are tired, people are burned out, people want to solve the problems and connect with each other on a deeper level, because we're tired of being fake. We're tired of surface level stuff. We're tired of being annoyed and frustrated by broken systems and not taking action to solve them. We want to actually get together and organize, figure it out. We want to gather around tables in real life and virtually and connect and be happy and not be dragged down into the abyss of overwhelming, we can't solve this problem, but actually be like, how can we do it? And so talk to me a little bit about, like, if you've got an example from your work, I'd love for you to just share an example of like, how have you seen play help bring a group together who have been struggling, who have been feeling overwhelmed, and how do we use play as a methodology to help people really grapple with what they're struggling through, name it, and ultimately have a breakthrough to get to the other side of co-creation of like, let's mobilize and take action on something, because play is not just about platitudes and having fun. It's about getting important work done that needs to
I,
get done.
can I give a historical
Yes,
example? I'll
please.
give you a historic example because I can use mine, but I think this one's more powerful. So the Montgomery bus boycott was 381 days, right? And the whole point of the Montgomery bus boycott back in Alabama, back in like 1955, was the fact of like black people or people of color just couldn't sit on the front of the bus, right? So they, without, mind you, cell phones, email, none of that, they were able to organize and transfer tens of thousands of people every day that typically use the bus through flyers, through phone calls, through or going door to door and making sure that the community looked out for each other. And it almost, I mean, it basically halted the entire Montgomery bus system, right? It almost bankrupted the entire system. And they did that in a very play oriented, like creative, like how to solve an actual really serious issue. And then a lot of people don't even know this part, but Rosa Parks was one of multiple people that were trained to do this, like that she was going to do this act. And she actually trained at the Highlander Folk School back in the early 50s with MLK, with I think Byron Rustin was there, a bunch of other activists. Um, and they would play to practice what would happen when they were at protests. What would they do if they were at a diner and someone poured a milkshake on their head? What would they do during that time?
Wow.
What would they do if she's being screamed at on the bus? They would practice through play these ways in which to prepare themselves for what they were going to deal with like 5 to 10 years later, right? So like using play in that context to challenge systems of oppression and also getting practice of like, okay, like tying that to now, like if you're dealing with a toxic person, you figure out with the group, with the community, okay, how are we going to organize around this person, right? Let's practice how we would actually challenge them in a meeting, or if I'm with them one-on-one, what should I do? Let's run through many scenarios and get that practice in. All of that work will eventually help to challenge the toxic system and the toxic person that is being supported by that system.
I love it. I didn't know that they role play different scenarios to help them practice, and that's really not surprising but cool, because yeah, we know, like, research shows that the process of imagining how you would behave in any given scenario actually uses the same neural pathways as if you were actually engaged in that behavior real time. So you are actually strengthening that neural connection in your brain when you role play something. And I use the nonviolent communication method. Like, I teach that in workshops, and I have a worksheet and I come up with like an imaginary scenario, and I literally have people role play how they would communicate using this 4-step framework, which is so powerful. Like, it's one of the most powerful tools that I use with groups, because they can go out into their lives and practice it straight away. It's so tactical and real. And so I love that. Role playing, secret sauce. Oh my goodness. All right. So I just want to thank you. Like, we have to wrap our conversation up today, but thank you for celebrating this week with me. I wasn't sure who I wanted to talk to this week, the week that my new book published, Creating Culture. But we touched on so many important topics that I cover in my book about how play is a tool for systems change. How play and creativity are not only just a tool, they're actually the way, they're the how we meet this moment that we're collectively navigating, because we're not going to solve these toxic, power hungry systems by using more fear, shame based methodologies. We can only use joy, like love, connection, creativity. Like that is my internal compass. It guides me. I know it guides you. And so thank you so much for sharing that with us today. Um, so my final question for you, you shared a lot of really amazing nuggets with our audience today. And I know that you do a lot of really great work out in the world in terms of talks and working with companies as well as online. You have an incredible presence online. So what's the best way for people to stay in touch with you and stay connected to your work, to get to work with you, to follow you and stay connected? How can people do that?
So I'm trying to make more mischievous videos to challenge power. Like that's my way of coping with, the dumpster fire that we're dealing with. So if you'd like to watch that process, you can find me at the handle at Jeff Harry Plays, JeffHarryPlays. And I'm on everything: TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, not on Twitter anymore, but the opposite one, YouTube, all those ones. So that's my handle, Jeff Harry Plays. And if you want to go to my website, go to rediscoveryourplay.com and hit the Let's Play button.
Yeah.
And let's figure out how to challenge power so we can make work suck less and remove ourselves of these toxic, antiquated, patriarchal systems.
Oh, they are on their last leg. It might feel like they're gaining power, but you know what? I see so much goodness in the world, and talking to you reminds me of that. I think about all the incredible people who are so inspiring, smart, intelligent. We have the tools that we need. We know what we need to do, and we are doing it. And when you stop tuning into the dumpster fire news and you start looking around in your community at the incredible people doing incredible work, you will be inspired. Your cup will be filled. If you're feeling despair, you ain't collaborating with the right people. So maybe you need to change that. And Jeff and I can help you with that. And by the way, I will plug your TikTok videos. I'm not on TikTok, but I am on Instagram still, unfortunately. But you know what? I gotta just tell you, like, my kid, my 11-year-old, loves your TikTok videos. She has the one when you're dancing like Beyonce. She loves that video. She got me to play it for her like 10 times in a row one day. And she has a request for you to make more dancing videos. So
I'll bring the dancing back. Very well, only for her.
Oh my goodness. What a joy, Jeff. What a joy to spend time with you this morning. Thank you so much for being you, for being a light, for lighting the way. I'm so grateful that you exist, and I'm so excited to see what your book is about when it comes out. And just thank you. Thank you for sharing your ideas and your incredible energy with us today.
Thanks so much. Hang in there. We got each other's back. We can do this.
Yeah. We are doing it. We are doing it. Okay, and to my dear audience, my dear listener, thank you so much for being tuned in today. I hope that you enjoyed this incredible conversation. We will not have an episode next week. I'm kind of a little bit on a unpredictable rhythm, but there will be more Cultural Luminaries episodes coming up. So sign up for my newsletter either on LinkedIn or through my website, jyotijani.co, if you want to be notified of future episodes. Next week, I am throwing a party at the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle on Friday, March 14th, on the Festival of Colors, Holi, and it's going to be a huge epic celebration. So if you're in town, please consider joining the party. It's going to be a once-in-a-lifetime celebration of fun. Otherwise, I just hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Keep lighting the way yourself or the people around you, and may we all get through this together. Be well.
Yeah.